Hey book lovers, Kaylee here, and welcome back to the Enchanted Library. So the last couple of weeks I put out some pretty long videos, and I thought today I would make it short and sweet. Today's video is 5 books that have made me cry. When I say cry, I really mean have completely and utterly destroyed me and left me a total blubbering mess, where mascara is running down my face and I'm completely inconsolable. So I guess, yeah, completely devastated me. I guess that's more like it. The 5 books that have completely devastated me. Alright, now let's get into this. Book number 1 is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. Now, this book, I mean, everybody, I'm pretty sure, has read it or seen the movie, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to crying inconsolably with this book. It starts right off the bat as a very emotional read. There are some moments of levity in it, but for the most part, it's just this was a very heavy read. John Green wrote it beautifully. I loved the story, I loved the characters, I loved the journey that everybody went on, and the fact that he was able to capture the characters of Augustus Waters and Hazel Grace. It was amazing. I couldn't believe that someone could write a story this impactful. And if you haven't read it yet, which I'd be very surprised if you haven't, I really recommend that you read this. It is such a great book for coming of age, and it's almost like a rite of passage. And just have a box of tissues ready because there is, anybody who's read this knows what I'm talking about, but that turning point, it's just, oh, it hurt my heart so much, but it was such a beautiful, beautiful story. Book number 2 is probably a bit controversial in regards to the content, but it still elicited a major response out of me, and that is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. Now, this book, it deals with some pretty heavy content. It's very dividing for readers. I do want to give a trigger warning for this book if you haven't read it. It does deal with some pretty heavy material in regards to being paraplegic and the discussion of euthanasia. So I want to put that out there. To me, this was a beautiful story. I respect everybody's opinions on the topic. Obviously, everybody's entitled to their own opinions and everybody has different feelings on certain topics. To me, this story was it was beautiful. I absolutely loved it. To the point of almost hating it at times, because it's such a heavy read with the content. Again, same thing like with Fault in Our Stars, there were some moments of levity. If you don't know what this book is about, it follows the story of Louisa Clark, who is our lead, and her journey basically from living a dead-end life, living in the same small town, having the same boyfriend she's had for years, where the relationship really is going nowhere and she's not completely happy with it, to not really having a good job that she ends up being fired from and still having to pay the bills and have a life. So she actually ends up being hired to work as a caregiver for a man by the name of Will Traynor, and he is a paraplegic. So it follows their journey of sort of coming together and dealing with their own emotional issues together. And it's a beautiful story. I love Louisa and I love Will, and this is just such a heavy read. I've had the second book for a little while, and I haven't been able to bring myself to read it because I haven't fully emotionally recovered from this book, and I read it a few years ago, so I mean, this is one I feel like will stick with you. The next book is another contemporary, but it does have a little bit of a fantasy element to it in the fact that it has a bit of time travel. And that book is The Time Traveler's Wife, and that's by Audrey Niffenegger. And this book, I guess it's kind of a thicker book, but this book, oh my god, this is one of those stories that I was just so upset at some of the things that happened to our main characters that I couldn't handle it. Like I said in my last tag video about books that made me cry, it's when you can't do anything about the situation that the characters are in and you just have to deal with it, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do, and you know it's heartbreaking for them, so it makes it even more heartbreaking for you. I mean, the movie was good, but the book had just so much more depth to it that you really felt for the characters more than you ever did in the movie. Henry's character in this is so much more well developed than in the film. Clare and Henry are a beautiful, beautiful couple. You have a depth of a relationship that you could never possibly imagine. Like, how Audrey came up with this, I have no idea. But kudos to her for doing it, because oh my god, was this book ever good. Like, I recommend this to anybody who kind of likes the idea of a chick lit book, but also is intrigued by the aspect of throwing in some time travel and a relationship that spans decades. Like, this is just such an interesting story, and I hadn't read anything like this before, and I think I read this the year before the movie came out. Like, it had been announced. Oh, it even says on here now a major motion picture, so it must have been the year that it came out, the movie came out, that I read this, because I wanted to read it before the film, which I do with most books. And I really, really loved this story. I wish that they were able to do more in the movie like how they did in this book. Like, some things happened to Henry in here that weren't really discussed in the film, and I feel like it would have just made you care even more for the characters if you had those points. I'm really trying to tread lightly with spoilers here, but if this sounds like something that you'd be even remotely interested in, I really recommend picking up this book. I'm going to switch back over to YA for the fourth book in the list, and this one is one that's going to be even a little bit more difficult to discuss because, again, spoilers, it is the third book in a trilogy. It's actually The Infernal Devices, Clockwork Princess, and that's by Cassandra Clare, and it's very, very hard for me to talk about this, but the epilogue. I mean, that's all I can really say. The epilogue just destroyed me. It was sadness, it was happiness, it was all of the emotions just sort of coming together in the last chapter of the book to the epilogue. Even reading it and rereading it, I still bawl almost uncontrollably. And I have read this book so many times. Like, I think I've read this book like 6 or 7 times, and each time it still gets me. I mean, oh, the characters in here, like Will, Jem, and Tessa, I absolutely love all of them, and it's a beautiful story. It's beautiful the way that it ended, but it made me get all of the feels and cry incessantly. The last book on this list is a historical fiction, and it's another one that I actually read before watching the film because I had never really heard of this book before, but I saw a trailer for the film years and years ago, and I really wanted to watch it because it had 2 of some of my favorite actors at the time in it, and I just needed to read the book first. So I picked up the book, I read it in one sitting, and immediately after I watched the film, which in hindsight was probably emotionally unstable of me because I was a tear-stained shirt, just uncontrollable crying, and then I went into the film, and then it just continued, and it was a very emotional day for me. But this book is Atonement, and that is by Ian McEwan. If you haven't heard of this, or if you haven't read this book, it is amazing. Like, this story is one that, again, encompasses decades. I'm almost tempted to call this kind of like an epic because it spans so many decades, like from childhood to adulthood. It goes through the war, it goes through nursing stations. It's so beautiful. Like, this story is beautifully written, and it's another one that situations happen that you obviously can't control. You can never control the situation as a reader, but even the characters can't control the situation, and that is even, again, doubly heartbreaking. So once a confession happens in this book, it took me a minute to actually fully understand the impact of that confession, and it just ripped out my heart. I can't even begin to describe how inconsolable I was when I finished this book because it was just so beautiful and heartbreaking, and I really, really recommend it if you haven't read it. I unfortunately had to get it with the movie tie-in cover, which I don't like to do, but I mean, it's got James McAvoy on the front, so I'm not too mad about it, but I wish that I had the original cover. It's something that I will get at some point, but yeah, I recommend this book for sure. It's just so beautiful. I feel like I need to reread this book, actually. I don't know if I can handle the whole situation. With Bryony and Cecilia and Robbie. Oh, yes, just pick this book up if you have a chance. If you're into any sort of historical fiction. Thinking about all those books again, I feel like I need to watch something really fun. Maybe I'll put on Parks and Recreation and watch some reruns of that. But those were the 5 books that have made me cry unconsolably. And I will let you know, that's not my top 5 list, that's not all of the books that have made me cry, but I figured to keep this video short and sweet, I would narrow it down to 5 books that I could think of most readily. And let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these books, or your list of books. I'm interested, and really all it means is that the author did a very amazing job at eliciting a response from you, like an emotional, physical response. It's a real testament to the writer's writing abilities and storytelling abilities that words on a page of fictional characters can affect you so much. It's just, I think it's because they ground the characters so well. Like, they make them believable, they make them realistic. Even in some fantasy books, I gotta give credit where credit is due. Authors, man, there are some amazing authors out there. So be sure to share this video with your friends, like and subscribe, and until next time, keep reading.